So we're just having a chat today about DNA and how
Mhm.
DNA can be used not just as general interest, but actually as a tool to help with genealogical research. Again, going back to being a detective and a researcher.
Well, what just prompted this was getting an email fairly recently about the updated origins, which made me look at the DNA again. It's always interesting to see how it changes. Oh, well, your
This
DNA
is
doesn't
in
change, but
Ancestry.
yes, sorry, yes, in Ancestry, getting that email about the DNA update, and
Hmm.
I've been keeping a record of my DNA since I did my test a few years ago, and sort of track how uh, my level of Englishness or whatever goes up and down, that sort of thing. But yeah, I just thought maybe we could just have a bit of a chat about our latest results, and then any thoughts on how it has changed since the last update or over time, and then some other ways that we've used DNA in our genealogical research. My latest one, I'm now 57% from England and northwestern Europe.
Right.
Uh, that was 47% in the last one, so that's gone up 10%.
Yep.
I was 34% Scottish, and that's dropped off to 26%. And there was a thing a few years ago when suddenly everyone had all this Scottishness injected into them on Ancestry. I know I do have lots of Scottish ancestry further back, but nothing recent. So I'm still a bit surprised it's 26%, given so many of my ancestors are from south of the border. That's fine. I was 10% Norwegian, but that's gone down to zero. So part of that's gone to England, northwestern Europe. I was 8% Swedish and Danish together. They've now split that out into the two countries separately, and I'm now 8%
Hmm.
Danish and 2% Swedish. Now, I do have no known relatives from those regions, but my family is from a lot of it from the north of England, where there was the Viking invasion centuries ago. So my assumption is it's coming from that. Though I have had some matches in Scandinavia, like DNA matches in Scandinavia, people who are, with Scandinavian names. So it is there, and there are sort of some distant relatives there, but there's no known connections that I've found in my tree so far. And I think it'd be quite a way back to actually get to a common ancestor. The other
Yeah.
thing I have
And
is, yeah, go on.
go on. No, I'm just saying that the results change. I think it's important to say why the results are changing.
Hmm.
We're not,
Hmm.
the technical experts on behind DNA as
No.
scientists, but our understanding is that in Ancestry, the more people that submit their DNA tests, the better they are able to compare the DNA of people from around the world. And this
Correct.
is
Yeah.
directly from the
Hmm.
Ancestry website. And they have a reference panel. And as the panel
Hmm.
grows, they identify more world populations and they have greater precision. And then they add new regions, old ones are replaced. In the recent update, I think they added many different hundreds, if not thousands, of different regions in
Hmm.
Africa. So as their bank of data on DNA increases, they can become more specific, and that's what drives the change. It's not that there was a mistake on your previous.
No, not at all. No.
Yeah, it's just a science that's developing, and as it develops, the good thing with Ancestry is they update your DNA and advise you and provide a really good control panel where you can see all your origins just as a percentage by region.
Mm. Yep, exactly. So yeah, the DNA that you have when you do the test isn't changing over time. It's
No,
the companies like
DNA is your
Ancestry
DNA, but
better
now there's
methods, and
3,000 regions. So
yeah,
yeah.
it's quite brilliant, really. And it's never meant to be 100% accurate at any stage. It's a work in progress, and it's a bit of fun in it. But it is consistent with my understanding of where I come from broadly, despite not having any Scandinavians in my tree yet.
Yeah.
But there is also, 7% Irish. And I know I've got, like my grandfather was born in Belfast, and quite a lot of his ancestry was from
So
Northern
it's
Ireland. So,
validating what you're getting
mm,
from primary and secondary sources.
yeah, exactly.
The
Yeah.
DNA, so you know you're on the right track
Hmm.
because the
Hmm.
DNA is matching the records, the
Yeah.
recorded history that you have.
One curiosity I have is that I used to have Down in Northern Ireland as a community. It was quite way back. That was just looking back now in 2020. I had down.
County
Um,
Down?
yeah, yeah, and I know that that's where my grandfather was born. So that I
Hmm.
thought, oh, that rings true. But then for whatever reason, it fell off, and then others come in, like Yorkshire and East Midlands and Northwest England. But now I have southeast and east of England, and I do have some ancestry down there as well, and also the Scottish Highlands. I know that's interesting to me because I know I have ancestry from the Highlands. Well, my ninth great grandfather was an outlaw
Nice.
in the
Yeah,
Highlands.
yeah,
Um,
long time back. When was that?
yeah,
What's the century?
1700s. Rob Roy McGregor was
Oh,
the
yep, yep.
direct ancestor. So that rings true. If, and so at least that branch of the family is from that region, but it's interesting it's coming through as a community now as part of my 26% Scottish. So that's the
Yeah,
communities
it's a
like that
great
are another point
tool.
of interest.
It's fascinating when they do
Mm,
the update. I'm always quite excited to open it and see what's
mm,
changed and what percentages have changed. And it's great that it's
mm,
validation of your research.
exactly.
Just as it would be at a crime scene, the DNA identifies the victim.
Yep.
We're identifying our cold cases
Mhm.
through the use of the DNA in
Mm.
Ancestry.
How's your DNA looking at the moment? Your origins, I should say.
Origins, again, like yours, it's more and more fitting in with what I'd researched, the research I've been doing over the past 40 odd years on the family. Some of the previous earlier DNA results were a bit strange to me. I ended up with, and again, it depends on, I've used different DNA tests with different companies. I won't mention the companies necessarily, but some of them have just come back with very strange. The one came back with some Andean Aztec blood. Now, I can't, I've never found anything related to that. Some others came back with Far Eastern Europe. And again, it's possible, but there was nothing in the records that I found that would
Mm,
validate that. Whereas the latest version, or it seems that every time there's an update, it's becoming more and more accurate and more fitting in with the tree that I've built over the years. So the Scottish, about 45%, 24% Irish, 14% German. Again, I also have a 2% Danish, and I've never, perhaps that's North German. That's a possibility. There's a few possibilities for that. I know part of the family came from Germany. Another option, I believe, is that the Danes, the Vikings, came to England, settled in North England, and intermarried over the centuries.
mm,
So you can't just take DNA that because it matches a current country, as in Denmark, that I must be able to find a Danish birth certificate somewhere for somebody. It
no.
could be that mix and the migration, and so I think you have to be a little bit open-minded when you get some of these results and try and think of other options of how that might have happened.
Yeah, definitely.
And you found the same, haven't you? I mean, you haven't found
Mm.
addressing Copenhagen, but
No, no, not at all. I don't expect it. It'd be very hard to find one, I think, if the more distant it is, but it'd be very interesting to come across one. But yeah, I have no expectations of doing so, even if the DNA
yeah,
says that originally part of the extended family was from that region.
be very interesting, like to see from other people too who have got English or they think they're from England. How many of them
Mm.
do have it, that Danish, Swedish, Norwegian DNA in their system from those Viking raids, but the fact that
Mm.
the Vikings did settle in England,
I
and
think there
yeah,
is on the Ancestry website, at least for some nationalities, it has a bit of analysis on that. Like I looked at one the other day, it was something like how Swedish are the Swedish. So looking at the
hmm.
ancestry of people in Sweden and see what kind of mix they had, and there was sort of Norwegian and Finnish, that kind of thing mixed in. But it might be one on England as well, but I haven't, or UK at least, but I haven't looked. But maybe something to look at later on.
That's another great advantage with the DNA results that come in on Ancestry is that there's a little history against each of the regions.
Mm,
So the Scottish Highlands, there's information about the clearances that happened
mm,
last 1800s. Ireland, it discusses things like the famine. You just get a little bit more of the general history around where your DNA is coming from, which I think is
mm.
really useful.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a really good resource. And if you're looking to put some kind of story together, gather information on where you've come from, then there's a whole heap that's on the Ancestry website, which is, yeah, really useful and very interesting.
Yeah, so highly recommended for anybody
Mm.
who's a genealogist and just wants that validation that they're on the
Yep.
right track. You might go down, find a branch and be heading to a certain nationality or region.
Mm,
I think regions are best because countries come and go,
mm,
but regions
mm,
is
mm,
how this is broken down. And having that in the background, that knowledge
mm,
that, yeah, I do have some DNA from that region is really positive and helpful. You know you're on the right track, or you know you're completely wrong track. If
mhm,
I suddenly had, I don't know, Indian or some sort of Asian region,
mhm,
um, and yet I know from the DNA that I don't have that
mhm,
DNA in my system, in my body, then I'd know that there's something wrong with either the primary, secondary sources, my research, something. So,
mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Another thing to note is that it's just because you have ancestors in a place doesn't mean that your DNA will reflect that. I'm thinking of my
Mm.
Southern African
African.
ancestry. I've got a heap of
Maybe you can
that.
explain a little bit about that African ancestry.
Yeah, I guess I've got like my mother was born in Zambia and her parents are born in Zambia, Zimbabwe, and there's lots of South African before that. But it's due to migration. So although that my family has been in South Africa, particularly, say, since the mid 1800s in some cases, in some branches of it, they were originally migrants from the UK. So it makes sense that any of my DNA that came through them
Yep,
is it's still British
still
DNA. Just
English.
doesn't matter
Yeah,
they lived in South Africa or in that region for a couple of hundred years almost. Yeah, that DNA is not changing over time because of the place living in.
yeah. Just very lucky that we now have this as a tool because it's quite
Mm,
recent that we've been
mm,
able to do a test at home, put it in the mail, send it off, and a few weeks, a month or so later, you get results that will be constantly updated as the science
mm.
improves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you do it once. It's sort of set and forget if you need to. You can come back and look
Yeah,
at it in 3 years' time, and the DNA companies, whichever one you happen to use, will be working away at it over the time, improving your results.
and
Um,
we are focusing on Ancestry because we both use
mm,
it and it's quite
yeah.
user friendly. There are
Mm,
probably other great ones out there. I've
mhm,
used some in the past that the results came back and they were very technical. I found them not as useful. It didn't
mm,
identify regions, or it wasn't in layman's terms. It was in very
mhm,
scientific language, very mathematical, and I didn't find it particularly useful for
mhm.
genealogy, which is my main purpose in doing it.
Yeah,
So
sure.
you've just got to read in the fine print and ask around. We're not pushing one or the other. We're just
Mm,
talking
mm,
about our experiences. So
yeah. Ancestry does a really good job of making it easy to understand and interpret. It's really good, especially for the casual user. I think that you get quite a few people who will do a DNA test because they want to see what their origin is by country or by region, just as a bit of a curiosity, and they're not necessarily
and they
interested in
might do nothing
doing
else, and that's
research. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly, and that's
great.
perfectly
Yeah.
fine. That's still useful. The more people can do that, the better in a way, because then they appear as cousins in the trees of other people who are keener on it. But then they
I
become
I
a really useful match for others who are trying to research their tree and work out how to connect to other parts of the tree and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and look, I found it. I can give one concrete example of where
Hmm.
DNA came in handy. We've talked about it in another video, but I had a brick wall with an ancestor from the 1830s. I could find no relevant records regarding his parents and how to push
Hmm.
past this brick wall. I've tried everything. I tried all the main
Hmm.
primary sources I could find and everything online I couldn't get through. I'd done the DNA test 3, 4 years earlier, and one of the great things about the DNA is in Ancestry, it will link you to first cousins, second cousins, third
Hmm.
cousins, fourth cousins, and you can do a search by surname. And I was just
Hmm.
sitting there one day and I was typing in and having a look because there are many hundreds of that, if not thousands, of people who share your DNA. Um, and I was typed in the surname of the person I was looking for, and it came up with a fifth cousin who happened to live in New York City. Um, and it was the only time that surname had come up, a German surname. So I wrote to her and I asked, we're apparently fifth cousins. Do you have any information on that particular relative or that family? It turned out that she'd been to the village and she had a 500-page book that somebody in the village had put together of all the records from the local church. And she very kindly shared a PDF copy with me. And I was able to then break through that barrier, through that brick wall, and go back another 300 years with really detailed primary source records. That only happened because of DNA.
Hmm.
If I hadn't have done that DNA test and then had the tools, the search tools that go with the results that
Hmm.
give you all your distant relatives that are on Ancestry, and you'll be surprised how many there are. How many do you have? Like,
Oh, oh, I can't remember. I haven't looked at my numbers for a while. Yeah, well, it's hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands,
yeah,
but it's a lot. There's
probably,
a lot of
yeah,
people on it.
if not
Hmm.
thousands of
Hmm.
people that you share DNA with.
Hmm.
Um, and they're doing their research. So it links all of their research to all of your research, and you can then do that search by surname. I found the easiest.
Hmm.
And when I'm looking for somebody on that side, on that branch, in that family with that surname, if you type it in, you know for a fact they're somehow related to you.
Hmm.
And you can get lucky. You can win the lottery.
Hmm.
And as I did,
Hmm.
I found a resource that I would not have found by myself. It's not available online. It was only available because this person physically traveled there. Um,
Yeah,
so give it a go is my recommendation. Yeah. I think it's quite economical too. It's quite a good.
it is, especially when there's a sale on. You can get some pretty good deals from different companies. Ancestry
Yeah.
has sales periodically, and I know
My
others.
Heritage. Yeah.
Yep, yep. And
Um,
you can also download your DNA and upload it to other sites, which is what I did. Like I did my test in Ancestry because
mhm.
you can't upload to Ancestry, but you can download from it. So I did it in Ancestry and then downloaded the DNA and then uploaded it to a few other sites. Sometimes you'll need to pay a fee to be able to view your results in another site, but you don't have to do a test all over again. Like you don't have to pay MyHeritage to do a test with them. You can pay $20 or whatever it happens to be to upload the results and view them as if you'd done the test through MyHeritage.
Oh, that so you can take those results and share them with other platforms and
Yeah, you
other
can.
search
Yeah.
engines.
Yeah, I did it it was after I did the test, so it was quite a while ago that I
Was it
did
with
that.
My Heritage or that you shared it, or
I did it with MyHeritage, I think 23andMe. I have to check on that. I can't remember whether they let you do
23andMe?
that.
Yeah.
And there's also GEDmatch, which is separate site and tool which is used for analyzing DNA and finding people you
Oh,
match with.
really?
Yeah,
I,
I haven't used that for a little while. I think it got bought out a couple of years ago by a larger company. It was a very useful tool, but there's all sorts of ones where, so depending on what your interest is, you can do a whole heap with it. There's yeah, chromosome browsers and things, and there's a leads method of analyzing your DNA, and there's a whole heap of stuff you can do once you do the test, and you might not get into that initially. You might just do your test because you want to find out where your origins are, and
As
maybe
I
just to see if you've
yeah,
got any
just
matches. And
yeah,
then down the track, you think, oh, I think I could do more with this, or you read about something which you can do once you have the results. And it's been a little while since I did some of those things, but when I have time, it's the kind of thing it's really interesting to explore. And there's a heap of tools out there, and the more people who do tests as well, the more useful your own results are when it comes to matches and things.
exactly. And another benefit is that again, I jump back to Ancestry because it's the one I'm most familiar
Hmm.
with, but
Hmm.
on where it lists all or the list begins of all the people who are in Ancestry who've done DNA tests, who've got the shared
Hmm.
DNA, parts of the DNA with you. It
Hmm.
starts with the ones who are closest to you. So
Hmm.
if your sister's doing it or your first cousin, it'll start with that. So you're not starting with a very distant, and then it goes first cousin, second cousin, third, fourth, distant. I think it is something in that order. The good thing is you can link up with people who are like first and or second cousins who, you know, not all of us stay in contact with our second cousins or even know who they are, but
Even
they
first
tend
cousins
to
in some
have,
cases.
yeah,
Mm.
that's right. You can write to them if they keep their tree private and say, okay, I've got a lot of information here I'm happy to share with you because we
Mm.
will have definitely many ancestors
Mm.
in common. And it's a good way to really build your tree quickly if they're happy to share with you.
Yeah, that's right. And it's also a way of getting photos. I'm always interested in getting photos of these random
Mm,
cousins I come across. 'Cause often one might have photos of people close to them as far as the tree goes, like their own grandparents and aunts and uncles and maybe great aunts and uncles. But then the further you go away from your sort of your
direct
nuclear
line.
family,
Yeah.
your direct line and everything, the less
Hmm.
likely it is you'll have photos. But others will often have photos of their own grandparents and so forth, which you might not have because it's sort of, a bit couple of steps over to the right or left, and if you're looking at it in a vertical tree sense. So it can be a really good way of getting photos of these people
Good point.
who you
Yeah.
have in your tree. They're just their names in your tree, and you got their details, and when they were born and when they died and all that kind of thing. But if they don't have a face, it it's harder to sort of visualize them as a person.
Rebuild
So
the yeah, yeah.
yeah, as an individual, not just a name with
As a
with
case
date.
file, if you like. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
No, good point. I should do that as well, actually. I don't have many photos. I've got the immediate family, of course, and maybe one or two
Mm,
generations back. But those are great aunts, great uncles I don't have. But by using DNA, going down the list of second cousins,
mm,
contacting them, or some of them share their trees openly online. So you
mm.
can just go jump in and, again, be lucky and get photographs,
Yeah,
download them
exactly.
from their site.
I guess one
I,
thing to know with DNA tests is that you may find things that you
uh,
didn't know about your family, which sometimes you might not want to know, or somebody up the line might not, surprise children, that sort of thing, or you there might be a surprise sibling or something out there. So it is one thing to be wary of when
that
doing a test
that's
that thing can
yeah,
pop up.
that is a danger with genealogy that people have to be aware of. Once you start digging back, even one or two generations,
Mhm.
secrets that have been in the family for years can be exposed, and it's how you treat that, and it's respecting other people and making sure that you don't release information that might
Mhm.
cause harm
Mhm.
to people in the family. Yeah, it's that moral dimension to genealogy. It's important when you're researching for somebody else. When it's for yourself, at least okay, I think this person can handle the information on that one, not. But
Mm.
you don't know what's going to pop up. It's surprising how often there'll be a DNA result that will come back with a first cousin or even a brother and sister. So yeah, beware, user
Where
beware
yeah,
beforehand that that is a not it's possible. It's not.
yeah.
It doesn't happen all the time. It's rare, but
But there are definitely people who found out things like that that they weren't expecting. Might have done a test innocently to find out what their origins were, and then have some surprise people pop up in there, and then have a decision to make on what to
What to
let others
share.
know. If it's likely to cause hurt to others, then obviously that's a consideration before going and telling everyone about your exciting discovery.
Yeah,
Be kind of
be
judicious
thoughtful.
and thoughtful. Yeah, and I'm thinking on who to tell what. Is it worth telling anybody, or you just keep things to yourself, or to a limited number
Mhm.
of people who you can trust that will you letting them know won't hurt them. But yeah, it's a personal decision, but it's one that if you come up with something like that, then it's involves careful consideration. Thankfully,
I
nothing.
think
It's not
something
in
is
my tree,
sent
but
or provided with the DNA information,
mm,
or before you take the DNA test, that can be
yeah,
that
there's
can
a chance
happen.
that that will be the case.
Yeah,
Yeah. Mhm,
yeah, yeah.
mhm,
But it can work the other way a little bit too. I've recently been asked by a family member, somebody marrying into the family, if I could trace his family tree
mhm,
because his grandmother's told his Anglo-Australian, his grandmother shared with him that her mother was part Indian, and in
mhm,
those colonial days, that
mhm,
was something that was kept hidden in their
mhm,
family. And yet now he's quite keen and proud to be trying to find that link. But the name was changed, so there was in, obviously
mm,
wrongly shame in the family over that connection. But now the family's quite keen to
mm,
rediscover that. The only way I can think to do that, given the change of names and the fact that the documentation was probably destroyed, hidden, um, is DNA. And hopefully we will find he's doing a DNA test now, and I'm encouraging it. The whole family's really keen to find that Indian connection. And we're hoping that by doing that and adding his name to my tree or our family tree,
mhm,
we will get a cousin or a third cousin or a fourth cousin and try and connect and find out the surnames and area of region of India. So there's real positives in having that DNA that you wouldn't be able to do that research otherwise.
no, I'd be very exciting. I hope something does pop up from
Yeah,
India
well, I'll
somewhere.
keep you informed if I do find
Mm,
something. It'd be fantastic. So
mm,
they're really quite keen. Apparently, and again, you've got to be careful with oral history, but the grandmother was fairly certain that her mother was born or lived in Goa, and that was
mhm,
during the period of the Raj. But
mhm,
it was, yeah, at least there's again, take it with a grain of salt, but if there's somebody from Goa who has a DNA match to him,
mhm.
then we're on the way to trying to solve that link,
Yeah, yeah.
which would be great.
Oh,
Yeah.
brilliant.
So
Yeah,
another bit of a cold case that we hope to solve.
that's right. At least those things are they're leads, if nothing else.
That's
So if
right, a lead.
you think there's Indian DNA, it's a source of inquiry, and
Hmm.
then using the DNA as another piece of evidence to verify or otherwise.
That's right. At least verifies the family story, if nothing
Mm,
else. So
yep.
yeah, so I'm looking forward to getting his results. It's quite
Mm,
exciting waiting, but yeah, we're hoping that we
yeah.
she had the story right. Yeah.
Mm. That's just reminded me of another point with DNA is that there's no there's no boring DNA. Like just because
No,
all your ancestry is from a particular region doesn't mean that's boring because there's no region that's more valid or interesting than any other,
important
really.
or no.
Yeah.
Every
Like I'm
region, every one of those thousands
mm,
of regions has a history.
mm.
Um, Fascinating history. Like
If you
it
happen to be 100% from northwest England or something like that, well, there's nothing wrong with that too. That means there's
no, it'd be
a stronger, I guess, identity or history in that particular area. Like
in some ways,
ours are a
it's
bit,
easier because you can spend
yeah.
your
You
time
can, hmm
understanding the history of that region to
hmm
see all the things that have happened over the past 1,000 years to your relatives and a region that's well documented.
mm,
The history of it's well documented. I've got the same 45% Scottish very proud of that and very
Mm, mm,
interested in the
mm,
history and
mm,
what happened with the clearances and the wars and you know the it's sort of that battle of part English blood, part Scottish, part Irish. They were fighting each other, so it's like we
mm.
were on this side and that side. It's fascinating. Yeah, as you said, it's like every one of the regions on the planet has a really interesting history.
Yeah, so I guess if you haven't done a test, it's a bit of fun doing one, so you can see what regions pop up in your results. And
Yeah.
it's as we've said through this episode, it's your DNA doesn't change, but the way the results are presented due to advances in technology and to increase the number of people doing the test. So I really wish I had more people in my family done tests. I don't have anybody yet who's
Oh,
in,
yeah. I'm
except for my great
encouraging a
aunt.
lot of people in my
But
family to
yeah,
do it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
While they're there, and
Mm.
it's not a painful test. That's the other thing. Going back
No,
to
no,
the
it's
test,
easy. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's not a blood test. It's not a urine test. It's simply you receive uh, a testing
Little vial
swab.
thing,
You
whatever
take,
it is. Yep.
yeah, you take
Mhm.
a swab of
Mhm.
just inside in your cheek. It's not like
Mhm.
COVID tests used to be in the old days, all up the nose and very unpleasant.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
easy,
Mm.
painless, fast. You then just take the swab, put it in a vial, seal it, put it in the sealed envelope with the address on it, and mail it back. Easy. And I've
Yep.
done that with a few different companies, and they've all very similar. So
Mm.
painless, reasonably economically, that's not expensive
Mm.
um, for what you get back. So we
Yeah,
highly recommend.
yeah, definitely. Especially now it's
Yep,
become so accessible. Go back, I don't know, 10, 20 years, and it was something which was really niche and something new and a lot more expensive. But these days it's so accessible to the average consumer that if you're interested in doing it, then why not? There's so many benefits to it. Once you get
yep.
your
And
results,
it
there
brings
are
the
so
world
many paths
closer
you can go
together,
down.
doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It does. Yeah.
You realize that we come from all over the place. Like
Mm.
rarely are you from one region. I mean, you're
Mm.
normally from at least a couple of regions. So
Mm.
even if it's within what's now a country,
Yeah.
yeah, quite interesting. So we really appreciate your time and thanks for listening.
Yep. Thank you, and see you next episode.